Well, hi, welcome back, everyone. So, before I begin, I will lead by saying that there will be a ton of links, citations, definitions, all that in the description. So many links and citations. In fact, I don't know that there will be much space for much else. So, yeah. So on this, I'm going to start it off with this, a Facebook post that I had made that initially kicked off me wanting to make a video on this particular subject matter. And maybe many people out there already know about it, but if you don't, well, I think this is a good place to come and really start to think about it. I did put into it a lot of aspects of the war on drugs because, that gets into one's right to autonomy. I personally hold the view that we should end the war on drugs and create safe supply harm reduction. I don't think drug use and addiction should be treated with criminal penalization if really, you're never going to have a clean, sober society. You can't stop people from doing drugs. Doesn't seem to matter what the punishment is. People do drugs. It seems to be something inherent to our nature, kind of like having sex out of wedlock or, just all kinds of stuff. It seems to be something people do and is seen throughout many animals within the animal kingdom as well. So if you can't stop people from doing drugs, what you can do is, you can make it safer, and that can be done with safe supply harm reduction. So there is some conversation about that within this, but that is not the sole aspect. It's just something that comes across, so it comes up, and there's citations and links about that in the description as well. But this started off with a Facebook post and something I saw on Facebook and led me to this. So I'm going to read this, and then we'll go into the successive chapters. So, starting off with this Facebook post that I made on the subject, I'll show a screen shot right here, the meme post. and this, I do have some script. Some of it's not scripted. Some of it is. Actually, I think it's the only part that is scripted. The rest will be free flow thought. Anyway, so I saw a post where I typed up this long response. Honestly, though, the points made in this post, I wish more people would see because it applies to so many of us. It's a lesson in how the American economic system is one of exploitation, extortion, and economic violence.
Economic violence.
We're going to have a video about economic violence. Then gaslights the working class into victim blaming. I'm a failure. Or I've got bad luck. Over things of which we ourselves have no control, as they tend to be things imposed upon us by others that cause very real harm. We do not choose to have someone else commit horrible acts upon us. The we ourselves do not want to, or that we ourselves do not want acted upon us. The person in that scenario, in the screenshot, to blame, is the person who made the decision to have an action that causes harm and violence, although not physical violence, onto others. Yet when this occurs, where a rich, elite, powerful, and privileged person, company, institution, or organization, we are told by the very system they run that it's our fault. Or, I am a failure. I made the wrong decisions and choices. Life isn't fair. Or, I have bad luck. We can only truly hold ourselves accountable to our actions and choices we make with our own autonomy. At that, we can't be expected to know and understand the outcome of every action and choice we make, as we are not perfect. We do not know everything, and everything comes with some level of risk or cost or sacrifice. It's okay to make actions and choices that do not always lead to all positive outcomes, but some negative ones. It's like food. Some things we eat, we don't like them, but we eat them because they're good for us. Other things, they're not good for you, but you eat them because you like it. There are many examples of actions and choices we make, and where many of us do actually hold ourselves to account, knowing those actions and choices to be only possible through our own autonomy. Choices and actions like sex, opening one's heart for the prospect of love, eating a chocolate cake, smoking, getting intoxicated, alone or with friends, paragliding, and many more. We often understand these actions and choices can lead to good things and pleasure, but also lead to other things. Things like bad sex, a broken heart, high blood sugar, health issues, addiction or chemical dependency, injury, or death. When it comes to participating or practicing our autonomy through the actions of our choices, the truth is we can't truly live life or be human without various levels of risk. To actually grab a life by the horns is to take risks and to get our hands dirty. What level of risk each of us are willing to take in this aspect is up to each individual person. Some people see the taste of chocolate cake, to experience its sweet taste, to be worth the possibility of blood sugar issues, weight gain, and the like, while others may see it as a risk they wish not to take. This is of individual choice, taste, and preference, and I personally advocate for full bodily autonomy, including over our own lives and deaths. No one in my mind has the right to tell you how to enjoy and spend this one life you have. This is why the war on drugs should end, along with the stigmatization that goes along with those who choose this way of life, even if one day they regret it due to addiction and chemical dependency. Friends, family, and community should not lose their humanity and always be there to help and catch those we love when they fall. This is why safe supply harm reduction are so important. We are never going to have a society that's completely clean and sober. None have ever even existed. We can't stop people from their autonomy of choice and action to go down this road, no matter how draconian and brutal the punishment. Illegality doesn't stop anything. And justice shouldn't be based on retribution and revenge anyways. So if we can't change human nature, what we can do is make the action and choice for those that do as safe as possible. Like we did with sex. We made condoms, lube, dildos, birth control, and treatments and cures for STDs or STIs. You are not ever going to be successful in stopping people from having sex. But just because reproduction is a thing, you're never going to stop people from having sex simply for the pleasure and joy of having sex, no matter how puritanical society becomes. Then there's this idea of being unlucky. Unlucky is when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or like when lightning happens to strike the tree in your backyard. Luck and unluck has nothing to do with fair or unfair. It has nothing to do with choice, autonomy, and the actions we take within choices and autonomy. Therefore, luck and unluck should never be attributed to one's autonomous actions and choices. Thus unluck should never be attributed or seen as someone's so-called personal failings, as luck and unluck fall into a category of something beyond that of autonomy, choice, or actions, and thus ultimately not within our control. Our choices and actions made through our autonomy is the only thing that can be contributed to something within our control. Before I paste what I posted, I would like to leave, a caveat. Don't think that's the right word, but it'll have to do. We choose to seek out drugs in this country and should stop acting like it's anyone or anything else's fault as to why they are here. The fact is, drug cartels don't just make a small amount of money off Americans' drug use. It's a massive amount. It's such a large amount of money, in fact. If the cartels took all of their profits they've made off drug sales out of the banks, closed their accounts, cashed out with that money, this is no joke and no lie, it would literally cause our economy to completely crash. Tons of banks would go out of business, and we'd lose almost 70% of the cash flow in the American economy. And hopefully I'll have some things about citations somewhere. There will definitely be links to those citations in the description. One such citation, though, I cannot give a link to, but a recommendation. A documentary series on Netflix called Dirty Money. There's one on a bank called HSBC Bank that explicitly discusses, as this bank did a lot of money laundering for drug cartels, so it talks about the enormous problem that lawmakers have had in trying to stop this, because the fact of the matter is, if the drug cartels themselves just took all of their money out of the American economy, it would literally crash the American economy, because that's how much money it is. So they're stuck at this weird crossroad where they're like, we want to hold them legally accountable for money laundering from the sales of drugs, but if we do that, if they just so happen to withdraw all their money from their bank accounts, it would cripple our economy. So, what do? Safe supply harm reduction is what you could do. It would mean that they would no longer really have any business here, that we would take control of the business, and it would be regulated, controlled, and done with a lot of safety precautions in play, and handled through healthcare. And it's not something that I think should be held behind a paywall. Healthcare in general shouldn't be held behind a paywall. But that's one citation or source, is that documentary. It's season 1, episode 4. For all the people out there saying they want to keep the drug cartels out, that they don't mind deporting the drug smugglers, that we should keep the drugs from coming into the country, and support the politicians pushing for that. For one, not only is it founded in racism, as the drug war has always been to those same people who would be complaining that they can't get their drug of choice anymore due to policies that would come from doing that. Americans are the ones that keep asking to have drugs come into America. Or the Americans, that's what it's supposed to say. I wrote 3. The Americans are the ones that keep asking to have the drugs come into America. We're doing it to ourselves. The call is coming from inside the house. A lot of people don't seem to want to admit that, but it's true. And there's actually an episode of some more news where they talk about that. Can we just stop this and admit to ourselves there's a lot more people that use some kind of drug here in the US than we seemingly want to admit to ourselves? If that wasn't the case, there wouldn't be enough profit in drug sales to cripple our economy if they just stopped and cashed out. That kind of money doesn't come from a small minority of people, okay? Maybe we should stop having all this hostility that leads to innocent people getting killed. Unregulated or anarchical capitalism, which is just extreme libertarianism. Markets were, due to the lack of oversight, controls, and regulation, become mired in crime and corruption. Can we just accept this reality in the war on drugs, address the root core of why this is the case, legalize, decriminalize, and stop giving political people in power to use their power and the war on drugs as an excuse to commit human rights violations up to and including murder. Which, when I type this up, now it's become even more of a thing. Like a big example of this is, last I checked, 76 innocent civilian people dead from mostly Venezuela, but some other South American countries, blowing up fishing boats under the guise of the war on drugs. And they are not drug boats. They're absolutely 100% known as fishing boats. Some have survived and they've been given hush money. They are fishermen and they're wondering why their fishermen buddies are dead and why the United States just gets to blow people up with no accountability, which is pretty mind-blowingly fucked up if you think about it. And it's all done under the guise of the war on drugs, which has historically always been mired in racism. And you're seeing it unfold right in front of us because they want oil and they're using the drug war as an excuse. So can we stop the war on drugs yet? Just accept the fact people do drugs and safe supply harm reduction, try to get them help when they're ready to get clean, because nobody gets clean unless they want to. Where was I? Okay. It's us. It's Americans. We are the ones seeking out, asking, paying to have smuggled in drugs. We are doing that. We are a country of drug users, like it or not. Let's stop blaming people of color from other cultures for our choices, wants, desires, and actions. Okay. Here's the paste of info on economic violence. I don't need glasses, and I thought that's what it said at first glance. I guess our minds are the dope fiend gutter. When I talk about the needing glasses thing, this isn't a reference to the last video. I literally thought this meme said glasses, but not that I personally consider that to be gutter thinking, but a lot of society does, despite the fact this country keeps wanting to blame its drug use problem on things like drug cartels. In all actuality, we are a country that really likes to use drugs. Americans are the ones seeking them out in other countries. Now they'll even have them delivered to our doorstep. I just think it's so hard to find joy, happiness, medical care. Many self-medicate. It's a thing. Self-actualization and many others, causing us to self-medicate, fall into pits of despair, existential crisis, and nihilism. This is predominantly due to isolation, lack of a sense of community and belonging, and that's due to a hyper-capitalistic system that puts profits over the well-being of people, and a system that often operates with legalized extortion, corporate despotism, and sheer exploitation. A system that often puts the burden of blame to cause shame on people as failures or bad luck because life isn't fair. When in all reality, many of us are victims of this that do not need to happen, yet still happen through no fault or decision we've made on our own. It comes with others imposing economic violence on us with exploitative practices and even extortion, where the legal recourse is stacked in our victimizer's favor, and they know it. For example, a landlord increasing rent and extorting tenants with illegal fees with the threat of the tenant losing their home lest they pay the illegal extortionary fee or fine. This is typically done against the tenant's wishes, usually by a powerful, rich, and privileged person, company, institution, or organization. The extortionary fine or fee tends to be just enough to cause economic violence or harm and damage to the individual, but not quite enough to rationalize having to pay $30,000 in legal fees to fight the already technically illegal extortion fine or fee with the threat of losing one's home on the table. And the law tilted in favor of the rich, powerful, privileged person, corporation, institution, or organization. The tenant, individual, civilian, working class person, takes the economically violent fine or fee despite the fine or fee being illegal in general, but also illegal in the sense it's literally extortion. Over the cost of justice and accountability, as well as the retaliation that will come from seeking legal accountability, that can cost $30,000 and possibly more damage, as the wealthy, elite, privileged, and powerful entity will more than likely retaliate in ways that will cause that person to lose their home when they win the legal battle or other retaliatory measures. This is not brought onto the tenant, civilian working class person, by means of their own actions. No choice they have made brought this upon them, not even the so-called choice of limited financial means. As those in positions of power and can control the amount of money to use to cause the economic harm, as well as those in power being the employer class, are also the ones who choose what people get paid and how much they charge for goods and services themselves. The tenant in this scenario, which this is only one example, and there are many, did nothing wrong. There was no choice they made, or could have known this would be the outcome. They did not fail themselves or anyone. It has nothing to do with luck or unlucky. Unlucky is when your tree gets struck by lightning or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is literally someone with lots of money, power, and privilege imposing their will violently, but not a physical violence, onto someone else against their own will. It's victim blaming. It's like saying it's the fault of the person who is beaten and robbed as to why that happened, rather than actual accountability of holding the person who did the beating and robbing accountable for the actions they chose to commit upon another person. That's the system we live in. And we do drugs to escape, self-medicate, and to feel good in a system where feeling good is difficult to achieve, as we constantly as we are constantly victim blamed for the actions of others and told we have failed, or life isn't fair. In face of active decisions made by others, they have massively negative impacts on our lives, as though we chose to be isolated from friends, family, community, as though we chose what employer class chooses to hire, not to hire, pay, not to pay, how much they will charge us for goods and services, including needs like housing, food, utilities, water, and medical care, as if we choose for the employer class, the owners of all this stuff with lots of power, money, privilege, whom are elite, to be fined, have fees, and nickeled, and dimed, have fees and nickeled and dimed us to the amount they chose to do that, not us. As if we choose to have the law tilted in the elite's favor to where justice just isn't something anyone can afford. In fact, most people who can afford justice and accountability are elite, rich, powerful, and privileged people, companies, institutions, and organizations. We, as the working class citizens, civilians, are told we failed. It's our fault. As if we would choose to have a system function in such a way and then gaslight us into believing the harm the elite cause onto us is our own fault. Yeah. No wonder America is a country full of people wanting to do drugs. Americans are the ones reaching out to the cartels, asking for them. If we were honest with ourselves, we'd realize if it wasn't for our want and desire to be high, then the drug cartels wouldn't bother with us, because they'd never be able to sell anything to us. And that was the end of my post in response to that meme. And buckle in. This video is about economic violence. What that is, what that means, and I also want to go over how it impacts on intersectionality, because it does have a significant impact on trans people, on LGBTQIA plus people in general, on BIPOC, which, if you don't know what that means, it's biracial, indigenous, and people of color, and women. It can be something that affects companies and the employer class. But I think as we start exploring what it is and examples of it, you'll find it's much more commonly imposed upon the working civilian class more often than any other. by the employer class, corporate owners. Again, this video is about economic violence. My definition of economic violence, it started off as just simple pinpoint definition of aspects of it and slowly turned into this long explanation of it, but it must use finance to put a person into a no-win situation in where typically a company, employer, or corporation use the person's need or want for a good or service to include costs that may not be legal, such as the case with extortion. They may also use the free market model to increase the cost, fine, or fee to the point in where it causes the person harm and that they can't afford the cost, fine, or fee. This can put the person in the situation of acting against their own morals, consciousness, or undermine others in their autonomy, freedom, or can be oppressive, suppressive, such as the case with employers demanding employees do things they know to be harmful to others for the sake of keeping their income, as their income is the only means in which they themselves can survive, and thus make decisions they otherwise would not make, and only make said decisions under the perceived threat of losing the ability to afford to live. The fine, fees, or costs can also be that of a nature where it puts the person who needs or wants the good or service in the position where if they pay it, the person imposing said costs knows it will financially weaken their ability to purchase other things, such as legal defense or other needs for survival, such as healthcare, food, housing, and utilities. It can also be used to get people to capitulate to an authoritarian demand that makes no real sense, such as a pet rent or pet deposits, keeping people from being able to take care of a pet, where in some cases this can be very important to ones with mental health as a source of care and affection, but not able to because the cost is too high, and thus they would not be able to actually buy food, healthcare, or other things for their pet, or even perhaps themselves. This doesn't make sense because regardless of the pet or property, a tenant is always financially responsible for any damages to the property while living in said property beyond that of normal wear and tear. So what is the pet rent and deposit for? This could also be a fine, fee, or charge in where the amount of money is just enough to cause economic harm, and that they may have to skip meals, healthcare visits, and the like, while not being too much to where it completely financially destroys the person, but this charge is still less than the amount of money needed to legally contend the fine, fee, or charge. This can be used to change lifestyles and habits, and even violate a person's right to privacy. For example, make smoking so costly for the product, for the cleanup and healthcare, that a person addicted to nicotine is actually subjected to economic violence as a means to curb their habit rather than actually receiving some kind of medical help to quit, which also brings the right to autonomy into question, whether for good or bad. People should have the right to autonomy to decide how they spend their life, including the things they ingest or indulge in, so long as this is not being imposed upon others against their own will. All right, so in the chapters, I wanted to give definitions of these things. So, of course, following this chapter, which I will give you a story. And this story is based off of a real incident, but, for purposes, I will leave their names, who they are, and other things anonymous for everyone's protection involved. So that was sort of my kind of definition and understanding of economic violence off the cusp of my head. In the other ones, I will give definitions that are more academic, that come from the United Nations, and other definitions that have to do with more intersectional things like women's women's rights organizations that for women who have not only undergone just economic violence but violence in general, LGBTQIA plus people, which there's economic violence that can be done specifically on trans people, and then there's economic violence that affects LGBTQIA plus people as a whole. And there's also the intersectionality of economic violence and how it impacts BIPOC people. This story, and I think I'll be able to have some pictures that I can show along with this story. So imagine that you're like an elderly couple and you've been living in an apartment complex for many years, maybe, not quite 15 years, but pretty close to it. And so the apartment complex is, going through this thing where they're renovating and remodeling the units, and they're, doing things that are going to cause the market value of the units to increase. They do this in many different ways. Remodeling and renovating the units is going to cause the market values to go up in cost. But so does having, if you, let's say, have about 320 units in the property, and only 20% or like 60 are actually available for occupancy because all the rest of them are being renovated, remodeled. So out of 320, you only have 60 available. This creates a situation in where there are more people looking for homes, more people looking for available apartment space or unit availability than there are units available. It's not that they don't have the units, and actually the practice in where complexes deliberately say that they don't have available units, where they say that they're at full occupancy even though they do have units that are available, that is called warehousing. That is an actual thing. Maybe I should have a thing about warehousing real quick right here. Yeah, that's an actual thing where they will deliberately say, we don't have any available units. And by doing that, by saying we don't have available units, even though they do, again, that has to do with a supply-demand sort of thing, where even though you have all these homeless people around in that area who have jobs and need the units and they can't get in because that complex is saying we don't have any available units, even though they do. The reason they do that, this warehousing thing, is because it causes the market value on the units to go up. So if you have 320 units available, but actually only 60 of them are available because all the rest are being renovated and remodeled, that creates a supply and demand thing where the demand is greater than the supply because the complex is doing something deliberately that causes them to become unavailable, and thus they're not lying when they say that the units are not available for occupancy, but this makes it to where the amount of people needing a place is greater than the amount of places that are available, which also causes the market rate to inflate, as well as the renovation and remodeling itself also causing the market value to inflate. So, being that all the complexes are doing this, every single one of them, they're oddly, even though they're all owned by different companies, they're remodeling and renovating with the same stuff. So it's the same kind of flooring, the same kind of countertops, same kind of sinks, refrigerators, appliances in general. It's all the same stuff. And the reason that is because they're probably contracted with RealPage, which is telling them to do that so that they can inflate their market value and basically increase the amount of increase their profit margin by quite a significant number. We're talking like they're making more profit off of 20% occupancy, even with all the renovations and remodeling that they're all doing. They're making more money, more profit off of 20% occupancy than they were with 100% occupancy on their old rates. That's how much money they are making. I mean, we're talking like 51% increase of profit on top of the profit they were receiving previously. So whatever that is, that could very well be 70% profit margin. 70%. Okay, so you have this elderly couple. They lived there for, close to 15 years, quite a while. And over the years of living there, when they moved in, the carpet had not been replaced, which that could be that the people who lived there before them only lived there for 2 years or something like that. The state law stipulates that the carpet and walls are supposed to be redone every 5 years. Of course, they're not going to do that while tenants are in it. But the fact that they lived there well past 5 years, almost 15 years, is pretty, that's something, that's normal wear and tear, like things turn into mist and vapor. Anything from all the stuff that you use when you take a shower, or the shampoos and the fragrances and then the soap and all that, and the body sprays or perfumes and deodorants and all that, it gets into the steam and then it falls onto a hard surface and resolidifies. Same with cooking. You've got the hamburger grease, you've got the chicken fat, you've got all the stuff from cooking fruits and vegetables, like carrots and onions and jalapenos or, whatever. Or even, using things like garlic, that is stuff as it cooks, and boiling noodles and potatoes and stuff like that. And it turns into vapor, turns into mist, lands on a hard surface, resolidifies. comes from whatever you're using that or people might use to fragrance their homes, from potpourri to air freshener sprays to plugins to incense, whatever that is. It turns into vapor. It turns into not necessarily gas, but some kind of vapor or what's the word I'm looking? Mist or expellant or something like that. Well, anyway, it gets into the air, lands on hard surfaces where it solidifies. And the other thing too is that it became very obvious that when they had moved in, they did not clean out the air ducts, because within 2 years of moving in to their unit, this elderly couple, within 2 years, they had to get their neighbor to come in and help them figure out why their vents were blowing out black shit. And, opened up the return vent and come to find out that there was a 5-gallon trash bag's worth of dirt in the return vent, which would explain why was black shit blowing out of the vents. And the thing is that's just inappropriate. Like, anytime after a tenant moves out, every unit should be ozonized. Every unit should have the ducts cleaned out, regardless if they had a pet or not. Because, like I said, just living inside the unit, you shed all these skin cells and hair. Actually, the majority of 80% of dirt or something. I'm not sure what the exact percentage is, but a pretty good percentage of what we see as dirt, as dust, is skin cells from us, from ourselves. And like I said, just everything that a person could use, from laundry detergent to soap to and the fragrances there within, to body sprays to perfumes to cleaning supplies, various cleaning supplies that a person may use, degreaser, Pine Sol, Lysol, Comet, soap scum remover, bleach, vinegar-based cleaning stuff, and whatever it is, and then whatever you use to fragrance your home, cooking, and then now you have this black shit blowing out of the vents, which gets into the air, lands on surfaces, solidifies. Then they started redoing the roof and redoing the shingles, which needed to be done. The shingles were made out of wood, which attracts various types of bugs that you don't want, particularly brown recluses. Brown recluses love to hang out in wood because a lot of their food likes to hang out in wood. And so during the summertime, when the wood shingles get really hot, the brown recluses like to come down into the units, and you don't really want to live amongst brown recluses. While they're not particularly very deadly, they can be, but it's very, very, very rare. They do carry a venom that is toxic to human beings. It's a hemotoxin, so you get bit by one, it can create quite a welt, and if they bite you in the wrong place, it can actually travel in your bloodstream to places you don't want it. Very, very rare to die from a brown recluse bite, and in most cases, when people get bit by one, you just put rubbing alcohol on it or something like that, or just take some antibiotics. Not that big of a deal. But you don't want to eat. It is a big deal. You don't want to get bit by a brown recluse. They're not good spiders. They're not spiders you want really in your home, or to be around them, and you really don't. So now, because they're doing this work on the roof, the rain comes, and now there's water stains in the ceiling. And something very strange, when I was visiting these people, I asked about their windowsill because, like, man, it was really fucked up. Like, there was just all this water damage and mold that was dried up. Apparently, when they had moved in, there was something wrong with the windowsill where it was off or something. A contractor came out and fixed it, so all the water leaks stopped. But there was all this water damage and you know, like, discoloration that looked like it could have been mold or mildew, or if there wasn't currently mold and mildew, there certainly was at some point. And it was right next to where this elderly couple, where their bed was. Just the layout and the way that the room happened to be, the bedroom. So they did fix the windowsill, but I mean, I particularly noticed that if it rained, there would be condensation on the windowsill, like on the bottom, building up on the inside of the window, and I just don't think that could be healthy. So all this water, mold, mildew, and stuff, that's, you know, kind of, you know, that's getting, you know, moisture, like steam, vapor kind of stuff into the air. It lands on solid surfaces and solidifies. So who knows? There could be fiberglass in that. There could be black mold in that. There could be mold, fungal, or, you know, whatever kind of spores, mildew spores. There could be whatever is used in the paint, that could be in there. So like asbestos or lead or whatever have you. So this is getting into the air, falling on hard surfaces, re-solidifying. And then there was a fireplace in this particular, I know not all complexes have that, but some of them do. And I really think if a complex is going to have fireplaces and not take care of them, then they should just brick them up. Just brick them up, put in an electric, you know, fake one that's sort of like a space heater thing, which is something they can do, and just get rid of it. Because the thing is the chimney stacks have this little metal thing that goes around them, and this keeps water from coming down into the units in a very significant way. Like, these chimney stacks will oversee like several different people's units. So even if like the person across the hall didn't have a fireplace, or the person across the hall, person beneath them, or people who live beneath the elderly couple, if they didn't have a fireplace, this would become an issue as this metal part gets warped over time. And it was pretty significantly old complex, built somewhere in like the late 70s or something, maybe the early 80s. I'm thinking more the 70s based on some of the appliances that they are getting rid of and replacing. But so then because of this, this giant water stain in the corner where the fireplace is appears, and it falls out, and there's this giant hole with black mold in it. Like, I actually, when I was over there, took a picture of it using Google pictures and asked, what is this? Is this black mold? It says yes. It showed me pictures of black mold that is way more severe than this. This had just occurred. I don't know if the complex ever took care of the core issue. I know at one point they had painters come out and just kind of Band-Aid over it. They took out the sheetrock and the ceiling, put new sheetrock in, and painted over it. But the next time it rained, as the elderly couple moved out, which I'm getting to, that spot was wet again. So, yeah, I don't know. So the thing is with that, in the short run, yeah, it's cheap to just have painters keep coming out and painting, and I think they were maintenance, so all they have to do is give them their normal hourly wage and keep coming out and painting over it over and over and over again. That's cheap in the short run, but in the long run, that water is going down into the unit below. It's getting into the unit across the hall. It's getting into the unit across the hall and down below. And over time, that's not just going to erode the ceiling. It's going to start creating water damage, mold, mildew, including black mold in the walls. And I know this from personal experience because I lived in an apartment complex in my early 20s. That's the reason I left that complex and came to the current one that I've been living at for 10 years, something like that. Was because it had this chimney stack issue, and they didn't want to have a contractor come out and fix the root core of the problem. And the entire apartment, this one bedroom apartment, it was ground level, would literally flood. Like if I stomped on the carpet or stepped on the carpet, it would splash water up to my knee. And I would have worms on the carpet and fleas. And then there would just be like little mold spots that would just grow up the wall and all over the ceiling. It was real bad. And the storage unit out on the patio was just in terrible condition. It was just covered everywhere. Like all the stuff that I had in it. Like I asked the painters at one point when they routinely would come out and just Band-Aid it, just cut the sheetrock out, put new sheetrock in, put the putty up, put the new spackling on, and call it good. The one time they were doing that, I said, "Hey, can you do that to my storage unit?" They peeled back several layers of sheetrock because maintenance had just kept putting up new sheetrock on top of the sheetrock that was already covered in black mold. They had to wear hazmat uniforms and pulled back like several layers of sheetrock or drywall that was completely covered in black mold. And everything I had in that storage unit was thrown away in the trash because it was all contaminated. All of it. It was all a biohazard, including my tent. I used to have a tent for camping, and that got thrown away because it was covered in fucking black mold. So that's why I came to live in the current place that I live. Is I had it with them. But this place that this elderly couple was living at would look like they're just pretty much doing the same thing. Like, they didn't want to fix the root cause of the issue, which, if you don't fix the root cause, it eventually becomes more expensive in the long run because the amount of water damage that accrues, and also if somebody happens to get lung problems from breathing in all that black mold, even if it's not black mold, just mildew or just mold in general, that can produce allergy problems, even if you didn't have them to begin with. It basically is somewhat like having an autoimmune deficiency issue because you're breathing in all these mold spores. It doesn't have to be black mold. The fact that it's mold and mildew can absolutely wreak havoc on your lungs and could actually be potentially give you cancer later on down in your life. So, and it'll affect like all the units, like from the top to the bottom. I think this one was like 3 levels. You had a top, ground, and then like this sort of weird basement-y thing. And you had that on both sides. So that's 6 units that, because they didn't want to have a contractor come out and fix that, will eventually, all 6 of those units will be completely destroyed from water damage, mold, mildew, to the point where they could officially be considered condemn the entire building, even, until they basically have to go in there, fix the root core of the problem, which is that just a simple metal piece around the chimney, and then go in, replace the walls, replace the ceilings, replace the floors, get rid of, like, spray this chemical stuff. I mean, it's such a problem. So anyway, this is becoming a problem. Again, that's becoming a propellant, or, you know, some kind of vapor mist thing that gets into the air, lands on solid surfaces and resolidifies. Very, very bad. Is federal by federal standards and state standards considered to be a health and safety violation. So you have that. So you've got this carpet that wasn't replaced before they even moved in. They didn't clean out the ducts, all that sort of stuff. And so when this elderly couple had to move, being that they're elderly, they're on retirement income, and they don't have a lot of income. So instead of trying to look for another place, which would be really, really difficult, with the prices have gone up so fucking high. So they took an offer that was on the table to do a transfer. And was probably the best idea. So they got family and some people they knew, younger people, to come in, and some of the people from the community to come in and help them get their stuff. So some of the stuff they had too, like the furniture and stuff they had, were kind of antiques, kind of cool to see, like antique dressers and coffee tables and stuff. They don't make them like that anymore. You know, all this, like, this is sitting on a table, is, you know, snapped together. It costs like $20. It's made out of like press board or something, like real cheap, and can break real easily. And seeing, you know, a coffee weighs like 5 billion pounds, but man, durable. But, you know, all these people from the community, people and their family, friends, came to help them move their stuff. And looking into the new unit, it's like, why are they using floating wood panels? And, you know, like, all the apartments, including the one I live in, is using floating wood panels. And to me, that's all form and no function. Like, I don't think floating wood panels are meant to be a flooring that you use to live on every day. Like, they're cleaning these things. Cleaning floating wood panel flooring is very, very difficult. You're not supposed to use any cleaning chemicals on this shit. You're not even supposed to get them wet. It's like, if you really have to scrub something out, this is the directions. It says you should get a washcloth and some rubbing alcohol, get down on your hands and knees and scrub it out with the rubbing alcohol. You know, if it's really, you're supposed to just sweep it all the time. So sweep and use a dust mop. And they're like, if you really, really, really absolutely, because, I mean, there's going to get grime stuck on this wood paneling, on these floating wood panels, and you can't take a mop to them. It's like, if you really, really must, it's like, you know, get like a squirt bottle with some vinegar and water, and just lightly spray it, and take like a microfiber, basically microfiber dust mop type thing, and just gently like wipe it up and I mean, I don't know how many people are gonna, I mean, I did research because my brother-in-law is in construction work, and he looked at the floor. He's like, oh my God, these are floating wood panel floors. I'm like, oh, are they expensive? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, fuck, because I'm going to get to that. So anyway, they have it too. They're putting them in everywhere for some reason. a lot of things that are all form and no function, like in the bathroom. It's just this little nub that sticks out of the wall that you hang your towel on, and it's like, that looks nice, it looks fancy, but it's not going to dry the fucking towel out. Most people don't use a different towel every day. They use the same towel over and over again until it's, smells funky, usually a towel a week. But if you hang it on this little nub, it's not going to get dry. That's the point of those bars, is you can hang it and out flat and it gets dry and doesn't smell funky too quick. So, so like, I don't know. In many ways, a lot of these new units are just economic death traps, for goodness sake. But anyway, when this elderly couple, when they moved in, eventually they got a call or a notification from the office that they needed them to pay $950 for the walls, carpet, and ceiling. The ceiling of which was on the property's fault for the leaks, the water leaks. The carpet, which wasn't even new when they moved in, but by state law are required to replace every 5 years anyway, being that they had been there almost 15. I'm thinking about like 13 years. They're required by law to replace it anyway. And the walls too, they have to repaint, and they have to they have to ozonize or oxygenize the unit anyway, due to the fragrances and everything. They accused the elderly couple that it was because of nicotine stains, but they, like, the guy, the wife didn't smoke. The guy smoked a cigarette, like a cigarette every once in a while, but not that often. And it's just, it seemed like a lot of that, like, it's like, who cares if it even was nicotine? If it was nicotine, not much of it was. Most of it was just probably from living there for 14 years and taking showers and cooking and the black shit blowing out of the vents and all the mold in the air. And this elderly couple liked to fragrance their home with incense. So I'd be willing to bet that most of it is actually just incense oil, but it doesn't matter. They'd have to they'd have to ozonize the place anyway, because the cleaning supplies that they used, the fragrances they used, and all of the detergent, the soaps, the shampoos, whatever, the things that they cooked, all that stuff that I just described up until this point, all the stuff that gets into the air, falls on hard surfaces and re-solidifies. None of that stuff has anything to do with nicotine or cigarette anything. The guy didn't smoke cigarettes. Like, he would go out on the patio and have like these little Swisher Sweets thing, and he'd do it like maybe once every couple months, like out on the patio. Didn't even really do it in the unit. And they knew they'd see him out on the patio doing this. Maybe they just assumed, but according to state law, after 5 years, you have to redo the floors and walls anyway, and the ceiling, that was totally on them for all the water leaks creating water damage. And there wasn't just water damage there was also like a lot of it underneath their kitchen sink, leaks over years, and they had not replaced the wood panel on the bottom underneath the sink ever. And so just there was tons of mold under the sink too. And all that stuff was getting into the air, landing on surfaces like a wall and re-solidifying. Even the Swisher Sweets, which that kind of is, it's a cigarette. It looks like a cigarette. I've only seen older people use them. It's not something I've commonly seen people in my generation or younger generations use. Oops. The thing is that even given that, it doesn't matter, because they're saying they have to pay this $950, and if they don't, they'll lose their home. This elderly couple got health issues and are basically disabled and stuff, will lose their home if they don't pay this $950 to ozonize that unit that they had lived in for 14 years, where the state requires them, that the apartment complex by law, to redo the floors and the walls, and like the only reason they're supposed to charge tenants is for damage to the property beyond normal wear and tear. So if it's normal wear and tear, like you're gonna cook stuff in the stove is gonna have carbon buildup, and there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how much you clean. You're gonna have soap scum build up in the bathtub. No matter how much you clean, it's going to get discolored after a certain period of time, no matter how much you clean. And from cleaning, it's going to get scratches and stuff in it. From using the sink, it's going to have scratches and stuff in it. There's no way around that. That's just normal wear and tear. There's nothing you can do. That's just, people are living in these apartment complexes. It's not for show. These units are not for, some modeling them off to your friends. Look how neat this looks. People literally fucking live in them. And this complex is saying, pay the $950 for ozonizing. So if you look up how to contest this charge, over the 14 years of living there under different property managers over the years, they've gone through I don't know, 6 different property managers over the years for the company that owned that place. They would have had to have written formal complaints, get them notarized, make many, many, many copies of them. So give a copy to the office, you tell them about it, you give them a warning, you say this is the last straw. And then if they don't do it, you're saying, I'm taking you to court or I'm moving somewhere else because you're breaking the lease. Now, if you choose the option where you're like, okay, you're in violation of the lease, a contractual agreement, because you are not making this a safe environment to live in. You're breaking the state law. You're breaking the federal law. This is a violation of health and safety. Technically, you're supposed to be able to leave the property and go to a different property without having to buy out the lease. But the thing is, they could retaliate and force you to try to buy out the lease anyway, because the only way to keep them from doing that is to take them to civil court, where you would go before a judge. You don't go to civil court so you can win a lawsuit. You're not taking them to civil court so they can get money, so you can get money. No, you go to civil court to ask a judge, can they legally have me buy out my lease when they were in breach of federal law, state law, and the contractual agreement, breaking the lease themselves because they had us living in, let's say, mold and mildew, which is a black mold and safety, health and safety violation. And the judge will rule no, they cannot have you buy out the lease. And you're going to want a lawyer for that, because every company has a team of lawyers that works for them. They just pay them their annual salary. and their job is to come up and show up for these things. So they will have a lawyer trying to make a case against this and argue that they should, even though they know that perfectly by the state and federal law, they can't charge them to buy out the lease because they're in violation. But the company will try to get away with it. So you're going to have to get a lawyer. So that means, that's one way you could go. The other way you could go is to dispute talking about the elderly couple. So the other way that they could go about it is that over the years, do all the formal letters, get them notarized, and here's the issue. Here's you haven't fixed the issue. Here's the warning, and then the final thing they could take that to, again, they'd have to go to civil court and go before a judge to ask if this $950 that they're being fined for ozonizing in a place that they lived for 14 years, if that's to get a judge to rule if that is a legal fine or not. And again, you want to have a lawyer because they're going to have a corporate lawyer from corporate head office whose job it is to just do this, and all they have to do is pay the guy his annual fucking salary. So it's no cost to the company, no extra cost, because they just hire lawyers. They just have lawyers. They just hire them. They're on the payroll, and all they have to do is pay their annual salary that they pay them every year, and to show up where these court cases pop up when needed, wherever that is, because these companies own properties across the entire United States. And every single state you go, they have properties. So again, you would want to have a lawyer to argue your case, and you would want to have pictures and videos and stuff like that, but come to find that to get the proper legal defense, when you go into civil court in front of a judge, like I said, you're not doing this for money. All the judge would be ruling on is whether or not that $950 fine or fee, whatever you want to call it, was legal or is legal or not. And the judge could rule, yes, it is legal, which you would have to pay for it, or no, it's not, which would be the more likely case, being that they lived there for 14 years. They transferred to another unit because they were remodeling and renovating it anyway. So why are you charging for the carpet when you're going to rip out the carpet and put in these new ones anyway? You have to replace the carpet anyway, even if you're keeping the carpet, because they lived there for 14 years and you're required to do it via state law. Every 5 years, you have to repaint and ozonize the walls every 5 years according to state law. Again, remove the cigarettes. Actually, Swisher Sweets. Are they Black and Wilds? I'm not sure what they are. Looks like a cigarette, but it's kind of like a cigar thing. They actually smell kind of sweet. Like I said, he only did it like once or every month or two out on the patio. And they've seen him out there with those. And I think they assumed he did it in the unit. They did use incense sticks to fragrance their apartment, their unit. But even putting this aside, all the mold, everything that I described of all the stuff that gets in the air, lands on solid surfaces, and re-solidifies, even if it was just the stuff the fragrances they used in their soap, shampoo, dishwashing detergent, the detergent for your clothes, or cleaning supplies, various cleaning chemicals they use, because the fact of the matter is, is that all that stuff, the fragrances and stuff from their laundry detergent, the dish detergent, all that stuff, and the particular cleaning chemicals they use, got into the air over 14 years, landed on solid surfaces, resolidified, and anyone that moves into that unit could potentially have allergies to any of it. So they have to ozonize it regardless. Period. Because the next person moving in, they might have a ton of allergies. They might use cleaning chemicals that have no fragrances. They might use vinegar to clean instead of 409. They might have to use Dove or hypoallergenic stuff. They may not use body sprays or perfumes or fragrances at all because they have asthma, because they have COPD, because they have allergies. So you have to ozonize it, period. They lived there for 14 years. And they're required by state law to redo the walls and the flooring every 5 years by law. But if they go to court to challenge this fine, this fee, to civil court in front of a judge, even if the judge goes in their favor, they could be looking at paying between $20,000 to $30,000 in court fees and lawyer fees, which they don't have because they're on retirement, they're elderly, they're disabled, and they don't work anymore. And so literally, it was at a point where this $950 was just enough money to cause economic harm, where they had to start a GoFundMe to help them catch up a little bit on finance so that they could even pay the bills. Because they're only receiving $950 a piece. I think the husband receives a little bit more, like a little bit over $1,000 based on his job credit history. So when he retired, he gets a little, like, I think maybe 1,500 or something like that. But the wife is only $950 because she was a stay-at-home wife for the majority of her life, so she doesn't have really any job credit history, living the trad life. For women, economic violence, and we're going to get to intersectionality. I'm saying, you women. So that was enough to damage them to where they could barely even keep the roof over their head, because that was just enough money to cause economic harm, but it wasn't enough to rationalize trying to pay $20,000 to $30,000 to get a judge to say, no, that's an illegal fine. They lived there for 14 years. They're required to redo the anything that isn't normal wear and tear is fine. Like if they had punched a hole in the wall, then yeah, they'd have to pay for that. But you have to redo the walls, and ozonize it after 5 years, as well as the carpet, according to state law. And I'm sure even from a federal legal perspective, this is just not reasonable. They were literally holding their ability to have a roof over their head, lest they pay this fine, this fee that just came out of nowhere, which they came up with another finer fee later, $70 some odd, saying that it was retroactively somehow tied to their water and trash, even though the only way you can pay that is by adding it to your rent. So how does that work? What do you mean it's 2 months retroactive? How do you pay for trash and water 2 months in advance? That doesn't make sense. Come to find out, that was supposed to go with the next month's rent, and they were just stupid and couldn't figure that out. But not the elderly people at the office. But they could have easily lost their home and ended up on the street with an eviction, which that could have resulted in death, especially given their age and their health conditions. If they had ended up on the street, they could absolutely 100% have caused their death. It's pretty much like extortion. You know, you want a roof over your head, you have to pay the fee. You're going to take us to court, that's fine. The judge will probably rule in your favor, but I really doubt you have the time, resources, and energy, because we know what your income is at the office. We know you are on retirement, and you don't have the time, resources, energy, or money, being elderly with all the health problems you have and the lack of finances you have because you're retirement and disabled. So pay us the $950 or be evicted and not be able to move into another apartment complex and end up on the street, which could possibly kill you. Now, this really bothered me, and because I'm thinking, why isn't it that the people who work in the office, why don't they have a better sense of class solidarity, class consciousness, communal solidarity, and communal consciousness? Well, their backs are against the wall too, are they not? As it was explained to me by another tenant. I mean, they've got a bureaucratic gun pointed to their head by the company. So they're told by the corporation that if they do not cause this harm onto people, be it maybe they have to go without food so they can pay this fine fee or whatever it is, whether it makes sense or not. Maybe they have to skip several doctor's visits, which could be dangerous, so they could pay this fine fee or charge. They could end up on the street. They could possibly die from this. But the people at the office, well, they're low on the totem pole for this is not a local owned place. It's owned by a massive corporation. It's got properties all across the United States. They're low on the totem pole. And so the company's got a bureaucratic gun to their head, and they're saying, if you don't do as we say, and you give them, these people, the ultimatum, you give them these fines, fees, and charges that don't make any sense, because we know that they don't have the ability to legally fight us on it. And we can do this to make more profit rather than cutting your pay. But if you don't do as we say, then you'll lose your job. And right now, the job market is very, very bad. So if you lose your job, the probability of you getting another one is not very high. And if they don't do this and they lose their job, they could lose their home, become homeless, and face death. So as far as they see it, they may know and understand and even feel in their the core of their hearts, the people in the office, that this is the wrong thing to do. This is putting a disabled elderly couple with health issues in a position where it could harm them physically, it could harm them mentally, it could harm them emotionally, and it could possibly even damage them to the point where they're homeless, which could kill them. And so you have people that are doing something they normally otherwise wouldn't do because they themselves are in the same position of economic violence, where if they don't do what the corporate overlord says, they'll lose their job and they'll be in the same boat of possibly losing their home and ending up on the street. And being on the street, they could possibly die. So that's an example of economic violence. It has very, very real consequences. It can cause people to go without food, or even take pet rent and pet deposits. Why is it that if you apply for an emotional support animal, which is really kind of a joke, it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are legitimate reasons for an emotional support animal. Actually, I would be a prime candidate for one, being disabled myself and spending all my time at home all by myself, as well as having generalized panic and anxiety disorder, having a pet that would give me love and attention, affection, and with my disability, having to take care of it and pick it up would help continue motion and moving around and improve quality of life, functionality, and stuff like that. I'm not saying there isn't legitimate reasons for emotional support animals, but there is a large amount of people out there that abuse the system who are claiming a pet to be an emotional support animal just because they don't want to have to pay pet rent and pet deposit. But why are people doing that in the first place? Because pet rent and pet deposits are a thing, and pet deposits tend to be rather expensive, and almost like half the cost of a deposit for an apartment is for a human being. And then pet rent is, I think, about the same. It's the third cost of rent for a human being. But if you have an ESA, the only time the complex will ask you to pay anything is if your pet damages property, that you're still responsible. Okay, why isn't that the model then just for everyone? We could get rid of the whole ESA thing, well, you'd still have ESAs for people who legitimately need them, but what you would stop is that you would stop people who are registering their pet as an ESA, not because they actually need an ESA, just because they want to keep their pet, now having to pay these ridiculous fines and fees that most people can't afford. And if they had to, they would have to give up their pet. And people love their pets. It's like their baby, It is for a lot of people. They love their pets very, very, very much. And that's sad that corporate greed, and I mean, look at it this way, that fine, the fee that the elderly couple get, that's almost a way of trying to scare tactic people, like, you could smoke in your unit, but it could bankrupt you. So it's almost like using economic violence, putting a bureaucratic gun to the back of your head saying you have to live your life in a certain way and do things as we see fit. Otherwise, we could bankrupt you and cause you to live on the street, cause psychological harm, cause physical harm, cause emotional harm. I mean, this is a prime example of economic violence, not just with the elderly couple, but the people working in the office who are being made to do things by the office, which including many of the families that have been displaced from that complex where Latin people, Hispanic people from South America who could not go anywhere else with these raids. And so, some of them were actually not only lost their home, and everything they owned, but were also taken away by ICE. So the elderly couple and all the people, perfect example of economic violence, as well as the employees in the office that they're being forced against their will to do horrible things to their fellow community, their fellow human beings, and their fellow working class, because if they don't, even if it puts a person into harm's way where they can't get medical care, can't feed themselves, don't have proper mental health or psychological care, or many things, or possibly even lose their home and end up homeless, which could result in their death. Because the company they work for says if you don't do it, then you'll lose your job, you won't have a paycheck, you won't have the resources, the ability to keep a roof over your head, which could affect your ability to have health care, your pets, psychological care, mental distress, or even end up on the street, which could be the cause of your death. The fact that the company is knowingly passing on fines, fees, charges that they know have negative outcomes to the point where it could literally do as little as cause economic harm, in where they have to go without eating or something, or go without some doctor's appointments, or as much as going on the streets that could lead to their death. The fact that they are making those economic decisions through fines, fees, charges, and such, knowing that that is the outcome, is damage to the person, all the way up to and including being dead. I can't think of a better example of economic violence. That's economic violence. And then to turn around and get yelled at by the elderly couple they had these stray cats, and they were feeding them, and the apartment complex is more worried about them feeding a stray cat, which cannot be redomesticated, that they've been unsocialized, which the cat was left there because of probably some kind of economic violence, because of pet rent, pet deposit, you have to move, yada, yada, yada. So the cat was left there, has reverted back to its being undomesticated, it's unsocialized, you can't get near it, you can't pet them. The apartment complex is more worried about them feeding a stray cat, which local animal patrol won't do anything about. In fact, there's places if you can capture them, you can take them to and get them fixed for free, as long as it's stray and you release it back as a stray. They will fix them for free. The company is more worried about feeding a stray cat, which I don't know why. They can't be redomesticated. They're not harmful to humans really anyway, and they've been living with humans amongst us for centuries and ended up domesticating themselves. But the They're more worried about that than actually taking care of a real problem of these bugs that are making a home out of the wood that's in the front of the building, and that absolutely do pose a health and safety violation to the tenants that live there, like all of them. They don't want to do anything about that. And they force people to pay pest control, but then tell the tenants they have to take care of this pest problem in a pile of wood that they put out in the front of the building. But they're more worried about the tenants feeding a stray cat. Economic violence, ladies and gentlemen. They know, the company knows these fines, fees, and charges, and really they have the attitude of, what are you going to do about it? They could retaliate and give them a massive fine and be like, okay, we'll take care of the pests, but we'll charge you an astronomically large amount of money to do it. That could bankrupt. And and again, you should really worry about these remodel and renovations that are going on across the entire United States. If you go to Reddit and look at apartment complex, it doesn't matter what state you're in, they're all doing this. The wood floors, and it's all the same color too and stuff. They're economic death traps. Floating wood panels, flooring is really expensive. Be really careful if you live in an apartment and you have them, because if that gets damaged, I guarantee you they're going to eat. Even if they keep your deposit and everything, I guarantee, and even with the law saying beyond normal wear and tear, and every so many years you have to do it anyway, required by law, I guarantee you they are going to try to start passing as much of the responsibility of replacing these really expensive things, like all of these fancy looking things they put into the units, onto the tenant. So if you spill a drink or something like that, or scratch up these floating wood panel floors, I hope the best for you, because to my understanding, they're very expensive. Yeah. These units have become economic death traps. And I think they know that. So, pet rent, pet deposit, that's just pure 100% profit. They have all these new things in the units, but at the end of the day, they don't even have to pay for it. They're making 51% profit on what they were already making, depending on the area that you live in. And then they're passing off the responsibility of the landlord, the company that owns the property, of maintaining and upkeeping it, onto the tenant. So, and instead of them replacing things and repainting and stuff, they want you to pay for it, even though they're legally required to. And remember what warehousing is. Yeah. So now let's go into the next part, next definition. Economic violence. All right, we're going into part 2, chapter 2, and one of the things that I brought up in the story was the idea of
Exploitation.
Is exploitation a type of economic violence? Well, we'll find out in the following definition. But in part 2, we're going to start talking about intersectionality. We're going to start talking about economic violence for various marginalized groups of people. We'll start with trans. Starting with trans. Yes, extortion can be considered a type of economic violence, especially when it involves threats of economic harm to extort money or property. Economic violence is a broader term for actions aimed at financial abuse and extortion specifically as a criminal act that uses threats to gain an economic advantage. How extortion is a form of economic violence. Economic threats. Extortion is defined by using threats, including economic ones, to obtain money or property. This can involve threatening a victim's business, reputation, or financial stability. Financial control. Just as economic abuse involves controlling a person's finance, extortion can be a way of taking control of an individual's or a business's financial resources through coercion. Harm to economic well-being. The direct result of successful extortion is a financial loss for the victim and a gain for the perpetrator, causing significant harm to the victim's economic well-being. For example, a business owner might be forced to pay a protection fee or risk having their business harmed. Broader context. While economic violence can be a distinct concept, often used in contexts like domestic abuse, the act of extortion falls under the umbrella of economic violence because it is nonviolent crime that uses economic threats and coercion to inflict financial harm. And for some reason, some of the definition has changed. So I'm going to read also what I initially, which a lot of this is the same, but yes, extortion can be considered a type of economic violence, especially when it involves the threat of economic harm to extract money or property. Economic violence refers to actions that cause harm through the control or abuse of finances, and extortion fits the definition when threat or coercion is economic in nature. Extortion and economic violence. Threats of economic harm. Extortion involves coercing a victim into giving up money or property through the use or threat of force, violence, or fear. This fear can be economic in nature, such as the threat of a business failing or the destruction of a reputation, abuse of authority. A public official using their official power to unlawfully take money or property is also a form of extortion that is fundamentally economic violence. Broader context. The term economic violence can also be used to describe other forms of financially abusive behavior, like those seen in domestic abuse situation where one partner controls finances to exert power over the other. How they relate. Extortion is a specific criminal act, while economic violence is a broader category of behavior. Extortion can be a specific method of committing economic violence. For example, a criminal gang demanding protection money from a business owner is both extortion and economic violence. While extortion can involve physical violence, it is often categorized as a type of economic violence when the threat is financial or reputational, as this causes economic harm to the victim. I'm not sure why these keep changing. The definitions like to change. The AI, Google AI's likes to change it to defend the company, and talk less about how there are forms of basically inherent capitalism that causes economic violence. And it's pretty clear why Google's AI would want to make it seem like a company is more the recipient of economic violence from people rather than consumers and employees being the recipients of economic violence, which is much, much more prevalent.
Part 1 of Intersectionality: Trans people and how they are impacted through economic violence systemically.
Okay, so the first group that I want to talk about that can be directly impacted through intersectionality on economic violence. Before I get into that, I do want to say that maybe this is why I should have scripted things like this when doing video essays, is that story part that was really rather long. I didn't intend for that specific part to be so long, but to be thorough. And I think sometimes I reiterate things because it seems like there are people in the comments where I don't know if they just didn't watch the whole thing, but I feel like if I don't reiterate, people miss information. And oftentimes I will see comments where they mention something where it's mentioned in the video. So I think psychologically I'm like, I have to reiterate over and over again. Anyway, I'll try to refrain from doing that in this one. Also, upon looking at the definitions, something interesting was happening. So the initial definition that I put into the paperwork when I initially was doing the research, now I didn't just use the AI grabbing things from sources. I used actual sources, which will be in the description. But upon revisiting them for recording, some of the definitions have changed just slightly a little bit to make it seem that the employer class and the business class are the biggest recipients of economic violence rather than the working and civilian class, which is actually the other way around. It can impact the employer class and business class in various ways, and even an entire country, but the most part, as we go forward, you're going to see that no, economic violence is something that predominantly impacts the working civilian class by the business and employer class, and even the, people who run the country more often than vice versa. So this part, I want to talk about how it impacts trans people specifically in economic violence. So part of this is knowingly, you can set prices and stuff and not know that has a negative impact on someone. So intent is very important. And right now, for trans people in the United States, it's very, very prevalent that they are using economic violence knowingly with the intent of hurting trans people by gatekeeping and bogarting their access to their health care that they require to achieve, to treat their gender dysphoria or achieve gender euphoria. And this is done by, putting a gatekeep on an age bracket by saying like, well, they have to be a legal adult. And in some cases that makes sense, but it doesn't, because a lot of it's predicated on misinformation that people who are underage are receiving surgeries and hormone replacement therapy, and that's not the case. The most that's happening in younger ages is puberty blockers, which typically is done at age 15, and that just puts puberty on pause, and then they can take them off, and then puberty continues as normal. And and there's even weird stuff around that, is that like if a cis het, or they don't even have to be het, they can just be cis woman wants breast enlargement, as long as they have parents' consent, that's perfectly legal. Like a 16-year-old girl who wants breast enlargement can absolutely get breast enlargement, and typically that's done through economics of making it extremely expensive to where only very rich, wealthy, elite people are able to do this for their daughters. Most working class, civilian class people cannot afford to give their 16-year-old daughters breast enlargement surgeries. That's not a very typical thing amongst the vast majority of people. But if you're trans, like if you're a trans woman trying to get breast enlargement and you're 16 years of age, even if you have parents' consent in many states, they won't let you. Or if you want to remove your breast because you're a trans man, they won't let you. So that's interesting. So, but one way it impacts trans people is they increase the cost of things like HRT and these surgeries, these gender-affirming surgeries, to a point where only very, very, very wealthy people can afford them. They've even made it to where insurance companies don't cover it because they see it as purely cosmetic instead of a medical treatment that is done through legalities. So this is absolutely an example of economic violence imposed on trans people, where the intent is that if they don't get access to HRT or these surgeries for the gender-affirming care for gender euphoria or to treat gender dysphoria, and get them in a place where they're how they perceive themselves in their mind, and it reflects what they see in their reality, and are able to be their true selves. This makes it so that where only wealthy elite people can afford it, it means if you're working class or civilian class and you're a trans person, you don't have access to this stuff. And recent laws have even made it so that if they're on Medicare, they don't have access to it. And they know that doing this causes emotional harm, psychological harm, and can lead to that person causing physical harm to themselves, and up to and including death. Like a lot of people use these words like self-terminate, suicide, stuff like that, but I'm not on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, so suicide. It's a very sensitive topic to many, but that is something that happens to a lot of trans people who are denied trans-affirming care, especially those who are put into things like conversion therapy. Their chances of committing suicide go up by more than 50%, I believe. It's like 53, maybe it's only like, their suicide rates are much, much higher than people who aren't receiving gender-affirming care, but aren't in a conversion therapy camp. So they're increasing the paywall, making it more expensive, more unobtainable for trans people to get gender-affirming care with HRT and surgeries, knowing that because they've done that, that many trans people will suffer as a result of that. Like I said, both mentally, emotionally, and even physically, up to and including leading to the cause of their death. And they know that. They absolutely know that this economic violence, that is economic violence. They're using economics, they're using their financial state against them. So people who are in elite classes, upper classes, the top 10%, top 7%, top 1%, if they want to seek gender-affirming care, well, that's not out of reach for them. It doesn't matter if insurance won't cover it or not, because they have the money to pay for it out of pocket, whether insurance will cover it or not. They can just do that. So about 90% of the population, within that 90%, any trans person who is of working or civilian class that does not have access to these financial means, they are in a situation where they're not able to, they're literally priced out of the ability to get the medical care that they need for their psychological, mental, and physical well-being. And so that's in intersectionality, specifically how economic violence is used systemically against trans people, both trans women and trans men, both. So the intersectionality part, I guess, is going to have subparts, because now I'm going to go into how it impacts women, and I'm going to, between that, I'm going to give the definition for economic terrorism. So anyway, before we move on to the economic violence as far as women go, I'm gonna stop the video real quick, and I'm gonna grab some citations of this. Actually, I think I'll wait, because a lot of the citations on how economic violence is used systemically against trans people, a lot of the citations include the how economic violence is used against the LGBTQIA plus community as in broad terms for the entire LGBTQIA plus community. So I will show those citations when I cover also gay and lesbian people as well, and just the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole. But I wanted to carve out specifically for trans people, because they face it in a unique way that the rest of the LGBTQIA plus community doesn't face. So I'm going to do subparts. This part was for trans people. Next part is going to be for women, and before going into women, I'm going to give you the definition for economic terrorism, and because that's a real thing too. That's where economic terrorism is more what impacts countries. The employer class and the business class. And then before when I wrap up, when I do the final part, before that, I will give the definition for economic violence as a whole, and we'll go over that. So enjoy the definition of economic terrorism, and we'll move into women. Since the AI wants to change the definition so that it puts big corporations and wealthy, powerful people as the victims, and the everyday, average, ordinary citizen, workers and people who are disabled or just trying to live their lives as less, they're, it's protecting the working class, or not the employer class, the wealthy class, and not talking as much about how quite often the recipients of economic violence tend to be average, ordinary, everyday people, and the fact of the matter is that economic violence seems to be just a pretty casual, baked-in aspect of capitalism in and of itself, especially the more unregulated capitalism becomes. So we're going to read from the initial definition that I was given, and then the one that it comes up with now. So originally, is there a difference between economic violence and economic terrorism? Yes, there is a difference primarily in the motive and scope of the action. Economic terrorism specifically uses violence to achieve political and social goals by targeting a nation's economic infrastructure, while economic violence is a broader term that can include a wider range of actions, including deliberate policies or practices that cause economic harm, not necessarily with a single implicit political aim. Economic terrorism motive, the primary motive is to cause political and social change through violence, not personal financial gain. Action involves acts of violence against economic targets such as infrastructure like ports of borders to disrupt a nation's economy and instill fear. Scope, a specific intentional act of terrorism with an economic component. Economic violence. Motive can stem from various motivations, including political, social, or economic aims, and doesn't always have to involve direct violent acts. Action, a broad category that can include policies, practices, and violence that result in economic harm, such as exploitative labor practices, predatory lending, or sanctions that disproportionately affect certain populations. Scope, a broader and more encompassing term that can include economic terrorism as one of its manifestations. And now, as we can see with the definition it gives us, let's see how much it's changed. Yes, there's a difference. Economic terrorism is a specific form of economic violence that uses acts of terror to cause economic disruption for political, social aims, whereas economic violence is a broader term for any use of economic coercion to achieve goals. Economic violence can be a tool for individuals, groups, or governments, and may not always involve the physical acts of violence characteristic of terrorism. Economic terrorism definition, the use of violence or the threat of violence to inflict economic damage and instill fear with the goal of achieving political, ideological, or social objectives. Example, attacks on ports or trade routes to disrupt supply chains and increase import/export costs. Sabotaging infrastructure to cripple a nation's economy. Causing fear that forces governments to spend disproportionate amounts on security. Economic violence definition, a broader category encompassing any coercion or use of economic power to manipulate, harm others to achieve a specific goal. This can include financial manipulation, debt traps, and sanctions, as well as violent acts. Examples: using debt as a tool for political leverage over a developing nation, imposing economic sanctions that disproportionately harm civilian population to force a change in government policy, using economic coercion to control or intimidate a population. Key differences: scope. Economic violence is a broad concept, while economic terrorism is a specific extreme subset of economic violence that involves the use of violence or the threat of it. Methods. Economic violence can involve a wide range of coercive economic actions, not all of which are violent. Economic terrorism specifically employs violence or threats of violence as its primary tool. Intent, both are used to achieve objectives, but economic terrorism's intent is specifically to terrorize a population through fear of violence to achieve its aims. Good thing I have citations from many sources other than just this AI. I just thought this would be a fun way of giving a quick definitional answer to a question. So, yeah, good thing it's a video essay, and I'm not using this as a sole citation. But I do find this interesting that it changes the definition of economic terrorism, of extortion, of the difference between economic terrorism and economic violence, because it seems to, as the definition changes, as I said, it seems to want to insulate those in power, the employer class, the more elite class, and frames it to where they seem to appear to be the bigger recipients of economic violence and economic terrorism, as opposed to actually it being more common amongst the working class and the civilian class than anybody, which I find fascinating.
Part 2 of Intersectionality. Women and how they are impacted by economic violence.
All right, in this one, so I think some of the definitions have already kind of covered some of the aspects of how economic violence impacts women. It's set up within our legal systems. It makes it very, very easy in marriages for men to control finances by means of controlling their income or their ability to shop, giving them allowances, and historically speaking, keeping them from having a credit card or being able to take out loans or have bank accounts of their own, and a lot of their economics having to go through a husband. And if the husband, particularly in the past when women didn't have a lot of historically equal rights, this could be very, very devastating and cause lots of economic violence. And you have instances where, where women have led trad lives, and when it comes to retirement, this causes economic violence to them, and that they don't have access to full retirement benefits because their work credit history doesn't give them a whole lot of retirement income to claim. So the more money you've made and the more you've worked in your life, the more retirement money that you collect when you retire. So if you've been a trad wife and stayed at home and cooked and cleaned and made food and took care of the kids and didn't really have a whole lot of jobs, and if you did have jobs, didn't pay very good money, that means essentially when you retire, you're only going to be collecting what you would collect if you got disability, like the base level, which is currently standing at $950. Like, how do you get an apartment when you are only getting $950 a month, when the average cost of an apartment unit in the area that I live in is currently $1,200 for a one bedroom, and for income-based housing, it's at least $950, so that's the entire paycheck. This creates a lot of economic violence for women. And I wanted to go over some things directly so I don't get off track too much. So there's this article, this rundown. So economic violence impacts women specifically by increasing their financial dependence, which makes it harder to leave abusive relationships. This can lead to severe psychological issues like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as physical health problems such as cardiovascular conditions, pelvic disorders, and difficulty maintaining a healthy weight. Economic violence also compromises a woman's long-term financial security, leading to increased food insecurity, housing instability, and reliance on government benefits. The psychological and emotional impacts, mental health conditions, economic abuse is linked to higher risk of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Suicidal ideation. Studies show a positive association between economic violence and suicidal ideation. Increased stress, being financially dependent on an abuser, leads to higher levels of financial stress. Physical health impacts, general health issues. Economic violence can manifest as a range of physical health problems. Women are more likely to suffer from pelvic disorders and have difficulty maintaining a healthy weight. Research has shown a correlation between economic abuse and higher rates of cardiovascular conditions in women. Economic and social impacts. The core of economic violence is creating financial dependence, which traps women in abusive relationships because leaving is too costly. Victims experience greater instability in employment and housing. Economic abuse is linked to a greater likelihood of experiencing food insecurity and needing government assistance. It can lead to denial of education or employment opportunities, hindering long-term development and independence. Examples of economic violence: controlling access to money, bank accounts, or credit cards, withholding money for household expenses like food and medical care, sabotaging employment or education, stealing money or using a partner's credit without permission, intentionally ruining a partner's credit or finances. And this, even one of the things it didn't list here is one of the things that it reminded me of it was if they have an abusive husband, the husband can use their wife's credit line and destroy their credit score. They can also deny paying alimony, deny paying child support, deliberately not getting a job so that they don't have to pay alimony or child support, leaving the woman without any financial means at all. Taking out life insurance policies. I mean, if you look at murder rates in these situations where men have life insurance policies out on their wives, and I've even seen this with a trans woman who ran away because her husband took a life insurance policy out on her. If you look at true crime series and you see like a guy who's murdered his spouse, there's almost always 99% of the time some kind of life insurance policy payout in somewhere in the mix. But this trans woman, she ran all the way from a different state down to a women's shelter, which the women there wanted to kick her out because she was a trans woman. More economic violence that trans people have to face, even in women facing it. The husband had actually dug a hole out in the property, which was like a large property, like many acres. It was kind of farmland out in the middle of nowhere. He had taken this life insurance policy out on her and wanted to kill her so he could collect on the life insurance policy of her death. She disappeared. And that's something that happens too. So women are impregnated, never see the guy again. They go after the guy for alimony. They go after the guy for child support. And the guy goes, I'm just not even going to work. I'm going to get paid under the table. I'm going to do everything in my power possible so as not to have to give you money, which causes direct economic violence specifically towards women in a way that cis-het men just don't really face. Nowhere near to, like, in examples of where men do face it, it's nowhere near to the extent or level that women face it. Yeah, I know this is getting dark, isn't it? I don't typically cover positive things on my channel.
Part 3 of Part 2 of Intersectionality. Economic violence opposed upon LGBTQIA+ people, systemically and overall.
Okay, on this one, I can speak to effect. I mean, historically, gays, lesbians, bisexuals, if you were found out to be any of these, you could be denied a job. You could be denied access to a bank account. You could be denied access to housing. This is absolutely with the intent of using economics to ensue violence upon gay, lesbian, bisexual, and trans people as well, the entire LGBTQIA plus community in general. And also it impacts our accessibility to healthcare, because it's even in today's modern era, like, it used to be a thing, you did not tell your doctor if you were gay in the past, like this, just back in the late 90s, early 2000s, because if your doctor knew you were gay and they put that onto your medical records and your insurance company, your health insurance, found out, they would use that to deny you access to healthcare if you had any kind of STD or STI, any kind. They considered you liability. So straight people getting them, oh, that's fine. Oh, we'll take care of you. But if you're gay and you get it, no, that comes right out of your pocket. So one of the things I've mentioned before with the HIV pandemic that happened in the 80s is that all they had to do that came at the cost of millions of people's lives was just do nothing at all. And, so a lot of LGBTQIA plus people, a lot of gay men particularly, just didn't do anything because they wouldn't even find out how it was spread. And, like using finance, we don't want to fund the research, using finances, economic violence that literally led to millions of people dying. They've used economic violence against the LGBTQIA plus community to keep us from having children, to keep us from having families, to keep us from being able to live under the same roof as the person we're pair bonded with. And this Trump administration, this regime that he has put some of the things back in place. Like, it is now, now that our healthcare is all digital, he's made it to where our health records are available to other organizations like government bureaus, government organizations, federal and local law enforcement agencies to have access to our medical records, specifically targeting surveillance on LGBTQIA plus people, not just trans people, but gay, lesbians, and bisexuals too. And then there's this thing with PrEP, which they don't, for some reason, they don't want the LGBTQIA plus community to have access to, as far as as well as we have access to birth control, condoms, and all those kinds of things. They want to make this medication extremely expensive. They can make it very, very hard to get. And the thing is having access to that medication, making it affordable instead of putting it behind a paywall, instead of gatekeeping it behind really high economic finances, it's possible that if we're all going to be sexually active. A lot of people are going to be sexually active before they find their pair bond partner. Then some people, they're just not monogamous type people. They might have open relationships, or they might have, and this not just gay people that do this, right? It's straight people do this too. They have open relationships. They have polyamorous relationships. Just look at the Mormons, right? Their whole thing is polyamory, and I don't necessarily have an issue with that, but keeping something like PrEP behind a paywall, gatekeeping it behind economics, causes literal violence to the LGBTQ community, QIA plus community, and particularly specifically gay men who and bisexual men who seem to be this primary target for HIV infections, and having better access to something like PrEP. That could potentially get new infection rates down to 0, and you have RFK Jr. and his shithead face defunding a research on a vaccine for HIV. So if you don't have HIV and you got this vaccine, you would not get HIV, and it was showing to be very, very promising. And he cut the budget of that. That could get new infection rates down to 0, not something that would just benefit the LGBTQIA plus community, not just something that would benefit gay and bisexual men, lesbians who they have a much lower infection rate. But the fact of the matter is this is a virus that anyone can catch, anyone, and its primary source of being communicable is through sexual activity. But that's not the only way. It's communicable through exposure to any body fluid, like predominantly blood, seminal fluid, vaginal fluids, even breast milk that can contain. It's not particularly found in saliva. I don't think it's found in mucus, but exposure, like that's the thing, like people with hemophilia and people who need blood transfusions and stuff, they ended up catching it because, as a straight guy, you can get HIV by having unprotected sex, because vaginal secretions can get into your urethra, because the tissue around the tip of the penis is very, very, very sensitive. The vaginal fluid can get in there, and you can get HIV from a woman who is HIV positive. You can get HIV as a top, and if you're a gay or bisexual man. You can get HIV if you're a woman. And the thing, cutting the budget, that is using economic violence with the knowledge that doing so will come at the cost of millions of people's lives, predominantly with the focus on that this will kill a lot of gay men. It'll kill a lot of bisexual men, but it'll also kill a lot of lesbians. It'll also kill a lot of trans people. It'll kill a lot of heterosexual people. And that's the thing, is medications like that benefit humanity. HIV is a virus that if we can stomp it out of existence, that will be better for humanity overall. And just because somebody is LGBTQIA plus of any one of those letters in that acronym doesn't mean we're incapable of reproducing. We can, and there's a lot of gay couples out there that want to have a family. They want to be very traditional, even. Like my husband and I, we we don't have particularly traditional gender roles within our relationship, but we are a monogamous married couple, and we take care of each other. There really isn't a whole lot of difference between us as two gay married men and an elderly cis-het couple. There really isn't. But the Trump administration has made open discrimination against us. Like right now, companies can have the legal ability from the federal government, because of the Trump regime, if they want to deny someone a job based on being gay, they can do that now with this anti-DEI shit. it's not just BIPOCs that are affected by that. It's not just women affected by that. It's not just the elderly affected by that. It's not just disabled people by that, who are all affected significantly by this as well. But LGBTQIA plus people are also affected by this, and that now businesses can just openly discriminate. That's federally legal now because of the Trump regime. He did that when he first got in office this second go around, which I'm not sure why everyone wanted a second helping of the Trump administration. So that's just off the cuff of my head, which for a long time it caused economic violence, like to gay couples. I mean, in a situation where before, let's say my partner and I had been together for 20 years, and we're talking about the laws that existed back in the 90s. We had been together for 20 years, and let's say my husband died from stomach cancer, and his father, who's a little full-fledged Nazi or something like that with SS logos and swastikas and stuff that wanted nothing to do with him because he's gay, and he dies from stomach cancer. I'm basing this off of a real story of a gay couple that I know, not us, but a gay couple I actually knew. So that the father could step up because our marriage, our pair bonding stuff wasn't recognized through civic law that we were pair bonded. It has nothing to do with the religious institutions recognize it. Doesn't matter. We're atheists. The problem is the state recognizing it for civic issues, for the person who has a power of attorney, who has access to the funds, who has access to the bank account, who has access to property and stuff like that. And the thing is like this parent who disowned their kid back when they were 15 could come in and take assets, even if it didn't belong to their dying kid that they had nothing to do with at all and disowned. That causes a lot of economic violence, literally just straight up legally sanctioned theft. And then, turning around, I didn't say, I don't care what you would do with the body, and leaving it up to the partner who's left in mourning and grieving, who just had a bunch of their stuff stolen from them, as well as their love of their life, having stuff of theirs taken from them, left with the bill of cremation and burial. That's a lot of economic violence, a lot that causes direct harm and damage. Maybe I'm so passionate about this because it does hit home as a gay man. But I also got some articles that we can look at, what specifically it says. So how economic violence impacts gay people. Economic violence impacts gay people through higher rates of poverty, unemployment, and housing insecurity, which stem from discrimination in employment, housing, and public services. The economic instability increases their vulnerability to other forms of violence, including domestic violence and sexual assault, as it makes it harder to leave unsafe situations. The cumulative effect of these pressures can lead to poor health outcomes and overall reduced well-being. Key impacts of economic violence. LGBTQIA plus individuals, particularly transgender people, face higher rates of discrimination in the workplace, making them more susceptible to job loss, being passed over for promotions and lower pay. Discrimination in housing markets can lead to higher rates of homelessness and housing insecurity for LGBTQIA plus people, which also leads to higher drug rate and drug use and suicide rate and stuff like that. When they do find housing, they may face harassment in shelters. Notes the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Higher rates of poverty and unemployment mean fewer resources for basic needs, including food, healthcare, and transportation. Economic instability can trap individuals in abusive relationships as they may not have the financial means to leave. Economic insecurity also increases vulnerability to sexual assault and stalking. It also puts LGBTQIA plus people in the position of being exposed to sex work and sex trafficking at very early ages, especially being left or disowned by the family. Economic insecurity also increases vulnerability to sexual assault and stuff. I already read that. Leads to worse health outcomes and a significant barrier to seek medical care. The chronic stress of dealing with stigma and discrimination can contribute to higher rates of mental health issues, substance abuse, and other health problems within the LGBTQ community. And then this is how economic violence impacts LGBTQIA plus people. Economic violence impacts LGBTQIA plus people through systemic discrimination that results in higher rates of poverty, housing instability, and employment barriers, which in turn increases vulnerability to other forms of violence and hinders recovery. This includes difficulty accessing housing, employment discrimination, and lack of access to adequate health care, leading to food insecurity and overall financial instability. Harassment, charged higher rents, facing harassment in housing or assisted living facilities, workplace discrimination. Due to discrimination, LGBTQIA plus people are more likely to experience higher poverty rates, lower income, and higher unemployment. Economic instability and lack of insurance coverage, a disproportionate issue for LGBTQIA plus adults, especially transgender and LGBTQIA plus people of color, can prevent them from seeking necessary medical care. Discrimination can also lead to a fear of seeking care, further exacerbating health problems. Economic hardship and instability make it harder to leave abusive relationships, exposing them to physical violence because they don't have the financial means, because they've been deliberately kept from the financial means of getting out of violent situations. Discrimination can create barriers to accessing essential public benefits and services, such as difficulty obtaining accurate identification documents required for employment and accessing government programs. Systemic discriminations. These issues are rooted in systemic discrimination in employment, housing, and public services, creating a cycle of poverty and instability, lack of protection. The absence of robust federal anti-discrimination legislation contributes to these barriers. School-related issues. Discrimination in schools can lead to lower educational attainment, which limits future employment and earning potential. My goodness, the LGBTQIA plus community is really significantly exposed to large amounts of economic violence. I don't think it's a competition. I think the economic violence of all the groups of people that face it, even the ones I'm not listing in intersectionality, but still have very much to do with it, like disability people and the elderly, face massive amounts of economic violence. Is pretty much baked into the capitalist system.
Part 4 of Part 2, Intersectionality. How economic violence impacts people of color, or BIPOC.
Alright, on this one, I really wanted to ask somebody who is a person of color, particularly, there's a black man I know of that has done a lot of research into things like the Black Panther and the Black Panthers and a lot of the the early civil rights movements and is very, very well aware deep into the history of all that. And looking at actually, F.D Signifier recently made a video about how, I forget the name of the movie, something like Sinners, I think is what it's called. And he was talking about like how it reflects a lot of aspects about Black culture in a way that a lot of mainstream media just doesn't touch. And he gets into how like all this stuff has to be appealing to a white audience, not just the Black community, because ultimately, at the end of the day, anything that comes out of Hollywood or is mass produced in the entertainment industry has to be appealing to as many demographics as possible, because at the end of the day, it's about making money. It's about ad revenue. It's about sponsorship. It's about the banks that are lending the money and writing the checks to make the movie. And he said the artist behind it, did a really good job at masking how capitalism itself has fucked over BIPOC people in general, not just Black people, but BIPOC in general, and how he was able to mask an anti-capitalist statement within a capitalist model, as well as making something that was appealing to having commentary at Black culture, at the Black community, that only people of color would ultimately get and understand, but still being able to market an anti-capitalist thing within the capitalist market, and even though having all these things that speak only to people within the Black community and Black culture, but still making something that is consumable and something that white people will enjoy as well. And having to remember that at the end of the day, all of these Black artists, and being a Black artist, being a BIPOC artist in general, you're constantly engaged in praxis, because it's pretty much almost what society expects out of you, or really what your own community as a BIPOC person expects out of you, because of all the things that have happened historically that have led to inequalities and equity and all kinds of things that still exist today, because many, many Black families were never even given the opportunity to grow equity and mass sums of wealth. It's just never been in their pocket. I mean, Jim Crow laws, slavery, and all that, it fucked them over for generations. And even went as far as the extent of, like, for example, a lot of white people know about their family heritage that goes back many, many, many generations. But for a lot of Black people, a lot of BIPOC people in general, here in the United States, they don't have that luxury. Some do, but most don't. They can't look at a genealogy or their family lineage that goes back generations, going all the way back to like the 1500s or something. This is something that white people do. People from European heritage do. A lot of BIPOC people in general, people who are part of the Native American, indigenous people culture and world, and their tribes, keeping the information about their tribes alive has been solely pretty much left up to them. And again, we can talk about economic violence of like how keeping them on the lands, like the indigenous people of America, keeping them on these lands, that's a form of economic violence. And I thought with the F.D Signifier's video, maybe I'll show a quick shot of that here.
Perspective of Dr. Jared Ball, a professor of media studies at Morgan State University, who, if you watch me, you should be somewhat familiar with, as he's somewhat of a mentor of mine. Dr. Ball is the furthest thing from a Hollywood insider. And while I and W. Kamau Bell can indulge in the good vibes and strong storytelling,
just a brief moment of that. So, you know what? What he's explaining, what he's talking about in that video, I'll try to see if I have room to leave a link to that video, to F.D Signifier's video, if you want to go and watch it. It occurred to me that's a form of economic violence because the industry is literally dangling the director's livelihood over his head, saying, you want your art to see the light of day, you want to make money doing your art, doing this film, this project, then it's gonna have to be marketable to the capitalists, to the banks, to advertising. We're gonna have to be able to make money off of it, not just make the money to produce it and pay the people, but actually make massive tons of profit off of it. And we have to be able to market it to white people. That's economic violence, baby. That's economic violence. Just the same as in the story half of this video, the people at the bottom of the totem pole working for the company, their backs are up against the wall too, in the sense that if they don't cause harm to their fellow community, then the company will take away their pay, take away their job, and put them into a job economy that's, last we got any accurate reporting on, was negative 15%. We are losing jobs left and right. Companies are closing stores across the country. Small mom and pop brick and mortar stores are shutting down across the country. So that's the last thing, because they could end up in this situation if they lose their job. Not like I read an article not too long ago in one of my live streams where a full able-bodied person, cis white het guy with a degree, went through over 1,000 job applications. And despite having an associate's degree and a master's degree, ended up doing something like working as a fry cook. That's how bad our job market is. I'll actually look for that part and of that live stream and put it here. CNN, very centristy, neoliberal, so things are pretty crappy. 1 in 4 U.S. households are living paycheck to paycheck. Austin is living paycheck to paycheck and saving almost no money, one of the millions of Americans struggling to make ends meet in the increasingly unaffordable economy. Like I was saying, this is an unsustainable thing that we are doing. No margin for error. Austin, who has a master's degree in fine arts, said he's applied to roughly 1,000 jobs over the past year, everything from teaching to construction, with no luck. That's horrifying. To be 34 and living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, things are pretty crappy. Yeah. So, yeah, and you know what? That with that black artist who made that film with a lot of, I guess, culturally relevant stuff about black culture and the black community, which I don't completely understand, but I'd like to understand it. Understanding different cultures and different ways of life is fascinating. I really think, this sort of topic should be covered by someone who's BIPOC and talk about how economic violence impacts the biracial, indigenous, and people of color in their very respectable communities. because it impacts each one of them differently but similarly. I mean, here I've got a few things. There's The Economic Impact of Racial Violence by Lisa Cook from the University of California, Berkeley. You have the National Institute of Health, NIH.gov, PubMed, Economic Hardship and Violence, a comparison of country level economic measures in the prediction of violence-related injury. So they're literally creating economic violence through racism by trying to predict criminality based on the amount of BIPOC people that live in an area. That's super fucked up. Economic abuse, the disproportionate impacts on the Black community by health debate. Mary State's digitalcommons.edu, poverty and the economic impact of people of color. And it goes on and on and on and on. So, am I qualified to give a really good, significant breakdown of how economic violence impacts BIPOC people as a white person? No. What I've mentioned and the amount of information involved in this is just the citations alone is like a book. That's how bad it is for people who are BIPOC, and the amount of economic violence that they have to endure. Anything from health, housing, bank account, generational wealth, generational equity, being able to make and produce art and entertainment and stuff like that. It's all related to economic violence, and that it's basically, if they don't do as what capitalism wants them to do, or as what the white dominated society wants them to do, they may never get any money at all. And throughout history, coming up with inventions and creating new forms of art, and the white community taking that from them and taking credit for it, even though people of color were the ones that created it. Like, we wouldn't have rock and roll if it weren't for people of color. They started coming out playing things like blues and jazz. That became the foundation for what would eventually lead into many various types of rock. And if you're into any type of rock music, I think it's important that we recognize we wouldn't have that if it weren't for people of color. We just wouldn't have it. And I think we should give them credit on that. The amount of economic violence that they have endured as a community is truly mind-blowing, and I wish I could leave all of these citations that I found. I haven't read through all of them. It's seriously like a lot. I don't know that I can leave all of them, because I mean, the Black community could create a 3-hour-long video essay on how economic violence has impacted them. Indigenous people could do it, and there's various types of the indigenous people of Australia, the indigenous people of Midwest America, the indigenous people of Western America, the indigenous people of Central America, the indigenous people of Eastern America, the indigenous people of Northern America, the indigenous people of Southern America, the indigenous peoples in various places all across Africa. All have a story of economic violence impacting them from Western European people and our cultures. We the ones who invented capitalism. I mean, yeah. Part 3.
The outro.
Economic violence is the use of financial resources to control harm or exert power over an individual. It can manifest in intimate relationships as restricting access to money, sabotage employment or education, or forcing someone into debt. And it also exists on a larger structural scale by developing specific groups of essential economic resources. Examples include taking a partner's paycheck, preventing someone from working, accumulating debt in another's name, or refusing to pay child support or alimony. In intimate relationships, controlling access to resources. A perpetuator might control all household income, prevent a partner from accessing a bank account, or make them ask for an allowance. Preventing self-sufficiency. This can involve preventing a partner from working, attending school, or limiting their working hours. Causing debt and financial harm. A perpetrator might take out loans in the victim's name, damage their credit score, or misuse family assets through gambling or other means. Controlling spending. This can include dictating how money is spent, checking receipts, or forcing a partner to justify every purchase. Broader structural forms. Structural violence. This involves depriving specific groups of people of critical economic resources, often through policies, practices, and conditions. Non-compliance with responsibilities. This includes refusing to pay child support, alimony, or other legally required economic responsibilities. Conflict-related economic impact. In a broader societal sense, violent conflict is a major cause of economic reversals in many countries. The magic of movie making, right? It's like, suddenly I'm back in this. It's like it didn't take me 3 days to record this. It did. 3 days. So that definition of economic violence leading into this, so as you notice with these definitions, I mentioned that the AI pulling information from the sources, it started changing the definitions of those things. And so when I recorded the definition, just the straight definition of economic violence, it went to that. So I'm going to read what the original definition was, which it says, economic violence is the use of coercive or manipulative behaviors to control or harm an individual's economic resources, independence, or stability. It can manifest in many forms, such as restricting access to money, sabotaging employment, creating debt, or withholding necessities. This form of violence can occur in interpersonal relationships, like domestic abuse, or on a broader structural level. Examples of economic violence in interpersonal relationships: controlling financial resources, preventing a partner from accessing bank accounts, credit cards, or cash. Let's go back to the women and LGBTQIA+ people. Sabotaging employment, hindering a partner from going to work or interfering with their job performance. Employer class or abusive husband. Coercive debt, forcing a partner to take on debt or using their name for credit without permission. LGBTQIA+, trans people particularly, and women. Withholding necessities, denying access to essential needs like food, clothing, and medical care. Women, LGBTQIA+ people, BIPOC, even elderly and disabled, and going back to apartments or various companies withholding fines, fees, and charges over people's head for necessities. And even if those fines, fees, charges are illegal, destructive litigation, repeatedly initiating costly legal actions, or financially drain a partner, misuse of property, stealing or damaging property, or refusing to contribute to household expenses. Broader examples of economic violence, structural violence, institutions or systems depriving specific groups of crucial economic resources, which constrains their ability to meet basic needs and achieve a good quality of life. Gender-based economic violence, specific acts that cause economic harm, often rooted in gender inequality and reinforced by traditional gender norms. And you know what? It's not just LGBTQIA plus people, specifically trans people. It's not just women. It's not just BIPOC, although BIPOC people, I think, by far have felt the wrath of economic violence more so than any other group. I actually talked to the guy that I was wanting to talk to when I asked him how economic violence impacts BIPOC people of color. He said, it's bad. It's really bad. It's in every city. It's across the globe. It's generational. It's equity. It's really bad. And honestly, how economic violence impacts BIPOC people is a video essay in and of itself. That is how bad it is. So, you know, through all of this, I've been saying for a long time that libertarian economic philosophy, you know, the free market, unregulated capitalism, and it, if followed to its natural conclusion, inherently creates oligarchy, which is minority rule of the top elite class. It inherently leads to feudalism. And if we go back to the story, the first part of this, I fail to see how that's really any different than extortion, something that was very, very common under feudalism, or how it's not unlike feudalism in general, in that, you know, it's like these people who want unregulated capitalism, no regulations at all. Well, you don't have private property then. There is no rule saying you can't have monopolies. But that's oligarchy. That's feudalism. And so, you know, like, what's to stop that? Like, you call the police. You have a significant immediate emergency, like somebody's breaking in, trying to rob you, trying to kill you, trying to impose physical violence because they're a bad person. Are you ready to pull out your, you know, like, give them money through Venmo, Apple Pay, pull out your debit card or credit card to pay the police to take care of criminal activity? And if so, what's to stop them imposing economic violence, saying, you know what, we don't like you because you're a woman, because you're BIPOC, because you're LGBTQIA+, or because you're disabled, or because you're elderly. And so if you want us to do something about the crime, you have to pay us an additional, let's say, $5 million if you want us to do something about it. That's a form of economic violence where you can't get justice because there is a paywall. There is a gatekeep from you being able to have that justice. And that's been done in real time to various groups of people within the intersectionality, as we've gone over. And I mean, how is the story different than feudalism? than extortion and just pure exploitation of a lord showing up and knocking on your door. Empty out your purse. Give us whatever's in your chest, all the gold, all the silver pieces, or, here's a fine out of nowhere. You have to pay us, let's say, $1,500. Why? Because we said so. And if you don't, then we're just going to throw you out on the street where you're going to die like a dog. That's economic violence. That occurs regularly under feudalism. And it's hard to say that economic violence isn't just baked into the very fabric that is capitalism itself. And that without capitalism, is economic violence even possible? I'm not sure that it is. At the very least, if you're pro-capitalism, to avoid economic violence, we need to ensure things like equality. We need to put regulations on capitalism. It's not like you can just call the police and say, my apartment complex, the company that owns it, is trying to steal my money. Because in order to get legal counsel, legal accountability and liability, you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to hold them accountable to giving you a fine, charge, or fee that isn't really legal at all. It could be based on being LGBTQIA+. It could be based on being BIPOC. It could be based on being a woman, elderly, disabled, so on and so forth, knowing you're not in the position to jump through those legal loopholes or hoops, or be able to afford $20,000 to $30,000 in court fees and lawyer fees. How is that really different than extortion? How is that different than feudalism and having a lord just come up to you like, what about health insurance or health care? Like, even though as a gay man who's monogamous, I'm far just the likelihood of getting an STD or STI is extremely unlikely, being that I'm in a monogamous relationship with my husband. So, but they could sit there and say, oh, you're gay, you want us to give you health care? Well, we want to charge you an extra $1,500. And if you try to dispute that, they'll say, well, that's perfectly legal. It's legally sanctioned economic violence. And, looking at all of these different groups, like I said, it's not just the intersectional stuff that I covered. It's also elderly people experience it in their own way. Disabled people, they experience it in their own way. As somebody who's disabled, I can tell you that there's a great impact on that through healthcare, housing, housing security, food security, having security and stability in general. It impacts even cis het white people. It impacts everyone because it's inherently in the system itself. If we continue on the path that we are on, I've been saying it for a long time. I think if you continue on the path of unregulated capitalism, it inherently leads to feudalism, which basically economic violence is the law of the land. Give us the money for whatever goods and services or face the consequences. And because you're a person from a different culture, if you're BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, if you're a woman, if you're elderly, if you're disabled, even if you're Jewish, they could change that price to a much higher one in anticipation that you don't have the ability to do that specifically with the sole intent of causing harm that could lead to mental damage, psychological damage, physical damage, and up to and including death. If you're elderly disabled, you're out on the street in the cold, subjected to the elements, food insecure, no access to health care. It could very easily be the cause of your death. So it impacts everyone. Even people with substance use people who struggle with addictions are subjected to forms of economic violence. Oh, are you a smoker? That's an extra fee on your rent. Or we'll charge you, like from the story. They tried to use that as a reason for a fee that made no sense at all, and they would have to ozonize it regardless because of all the other stuff, living there for 14 years. And then there's this really stupid circular reasoning with people with substance uses. It's like they are forced into court, which they have to pay all the court fines, and they get this black mark over their head that makes it difficult for them to get a job, difficult for them to get housing, difficult for them to change their life in a different direction and be a different type of person. And then they expect you to go into treatment, which you may spend 6 months in, and you can't work while you're doing that. So how are you supposed to work, pay for the treatment when you don't have a job and expected not to have a job to get the treatment you're required to by law, with these compiling fines on top of you? Again, economic violence instead of access to care that would make sense, where you would be able to work, where you would be able to get a house, where you would be able to get medical treatment, so on and so forth. This is why safe supply harm reduction, one aspect of it, and why it's so important to do, is it gets rid of an aspect of economic violence of which pushes people towards breaking laws and criminality to try to survive. So yeah, there's all that. And it's not just people with substance use that get stuck in that sort of vicious loop that doesn't make sense and just causes countless amounts of economic violence and damage. Overall, though, we all experience economic violence as the more and more the business class and employer class has rules, laws, and regulations stripped away so they can do things more and more of what they want to do. And it's not like you can call the police or just call an organization up and say, hey, this is happening, come and help me. There's an injustice going on that could cause significant damage to my life. In many cases, it's legally sanctioned. And if it's not legally sanctioned, you have to jump through a bunch of legal loopholes. So think about all of the examples of economic violence and how it impacts all those groups of people. Now imagine somebody who is a biracial, black, lesbian, trans, elderly, disabled woman, and the amounts of economic violence that individual endures as a trans person, as a woman, as someone who's disabled, as somebody who hits two categories in BIPOC, as somebody who's elderly, all the different forms of economic violence that affect all these various groups, they can coalesce intersectionally in one individual in multiple ways, maximizing extreme amounts of economic damage that, like I said, this is not victimless. We're not talking about like, oh, just going without a house for a few years, getting on your feet and getting a house again. The losing everything. We're talking about this could even lead to people's death. It's almost like by using economic violence, there's a plausible deniability that even though committing this act of economic violence was absolutely the cause that led to them dying, you can say, well, it's not my problem. I just have these charges, fines, and fees, even though they know that it causes this damage to them and can lead to their death. They do it anyway for the sake of profit, for the sake of discrimination. Not being able to get a job because of open discrimination, not being able to open bank accounts, have a house, on and on and on. I mean, this is a pretty significant thing. It's a real thing, and as if you look in the description, there are tons of citations. I'm not even sure I will be able to put all of them in the description because there are so many. In fact, you see this? These papers here? There's one. There's one. There's one. There's one. And here's some more. All citations. All citations from academic sources, United Nations, different countries, colleges, universities, all documenting and talking about social science, that which is economic violence. It's a very real thing. And it causes a lot of damage to people, predominantly the working and civilian class, to 98% of American people have experienced economic violence at some point. And like I said, in a lot of cases, it's legally sanctioned. Or if it's not, even if it's not like you can call your local police department up or whatever and report it. No, you have to jump through legal hoops to hold them accountable to the damage they have done to you. And a lot of people don't have the time, resources, which is money, and energy to really do it, or even know how, or have access to the ability to even do it. So they just have to endure the economic violence. This was a very interesting topic. Took a lot longer than I expected. I didn't expect the video to be this long, but this is a very intricate topic with a lot of aspects of how it impacts various people within society. And I want to reiterate, if we continue on the path we are, where we continuously deregulate, tell the companies they can just discriminate because DEI and blah, 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 whatever, fuck it. If we continue stripping regulations away, saying, like rules saying you can't increase rent rates beyond a certain percentage, or you can't profit on housing beyond a certain percentage, because if you do, you're literally profiting to the point where you're not just destroying people's lives and bringing them to the like causing them physical harm, mental harm, emotional harm. There's a certain percentage of them that you're causing death to, but on top of that, you're profiting at the cost of destroying society and the economy itself. That's not sustainable. it's we can't continue on the path that we're on. It's not sustainable. We will all end up with accruing so much financial damage to 90 some odd percent of the population that a country that endures that it takes several generations to come back from. And so if you're a capitalist, at the very least, you have to have regulations and restrictions on capitalism. At best, my best suggestion as a solution to this issue is people need to be more informed on what economic violence is. Stop being complicit and complacent. Have more class consciousness and solidarity and community consciousness and solidarity. Stop allowing companies to dangle resources or dangle your job over your head, and start saying, no, this is not ethical. This is not the right thing to do. I am not going to damage someone's life and possibly bring them to the brink of death, if not cause their death, just so you can buy another yacht or another mansion, or do it just because you don't like who that person is. You know, it's just that simple. Like, socialism is what I would say. You know, when you see economic violence, be angry about it, be frustrated, educate people on what it is. Pet rent and pet deposits are a form of economic violence. They are pure profit, and whatever reason they tell you on why they charge that is nothing more than an excuse for charging people what is essentially just economic violence and pure profit. It is completely understandable that if you have a pet or any damage that you do to a unit or a property, that you are responsible for that. That makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to preemptively charge people and then, if it does happen, turn around, keep the pet deposit and the rent, and say, oh, well, your animal scratched up this door frame, so we're going to have to charge you for that. So they're charging you anyway. It's economic violence, and it's absolutely okay to be mad about it, and we should be talking about it. We should be angry. We should stop being complacent. We need to start learning how to say no, and enough is enough, and they've gone too far. That's my proposal of the fix, is socialism, education, educating people what is economic violence, and getting people to realize a lot of the times when people have had violence bestowed upon them, you know, abuse and so on, even economic violence, you know, sometimes we don't always want to admit that something bad happened to us. That or that's just the way things are, that this is normal. It's not normal. It's not. It is not normal to be violated. We don't have to be doing that. We don't need to be doing that. It's just cruelty. For the sake of cruelty or profiting, even if it comes at the cost of destroying human lives. And so if you're worried about human lives and population people, don't do things that are antithetical. A lot of people aren't having kids in Gen Z because of the amount of economic violence that's been bestowed upon them. It's not because of women's rights and equality for women, equality for BIPOC, equality for LGBTQIA plus people, or trans rights, or this, that, and the other. It's because they literally can't afford to have kids. That's a form of economic violence. They're being charged to the point for everything, for basic needs, to the point where they just simply can't afford to have kids. Okay, what better example of economic violence do you need than that when the economic violence is preventing you from having a family? And I already gave an example of how they've literally gone out of their way to do that to LGBTQIA plus people deliberately and knowingly, ensuing economic violence upon LGBTQIA plus people like myself so that we don't have families. So you can't say that they don't know that that is the cause or the outcome. They absolutely do. Absolutely. So, in making this, I ended up making a new song. And as I fade out from this explanation, I hope I did well in educating people. Please, economic violence happens to you. Don't just say that's how things are. Don't be complacent. Like, if your boss wants you to do something that you know is harmful to another human being, it's not really rational. It doesn't make sense. It's just economic harm. Just tell the corporation, oh yeah, we did it, and then do nothing at all. Have solidarity with your fellow human beings, with your fellow working class, with your fellow civilian class, and just say you did when you didn't, because you now should know those things have consequences that could lead to a person's death. Now, that's the worst case. The non-worst case aren't really great. They're pretty bad outcomes. Economic violence does a lot of damage. So, as I cut away and wrap this up, and sorry it was so long, I didn't realize how intricate this topic was. Educate people. Socialism. If you pro-capitalism, we at least got to get pro-capitalist people on to understand libertarian philosophy, like unregulated capitalism, anarchical capitalism. It's a dumpster fire. It is literally just it's an economic philosophy that is a pile of hot, wet, burning trash. And there is a reason why in academic economic courses they don't treat it seriously, is because that's what it is. And it leads to feudalism. It leads to oligarchy, a rule of a minority. We'll be screwed. And we're already screwed. We're already feeling the impacts through economic violence. We at least need regulation. But I would go a step further and say democratic socialism, it's a great way of defining the top, putting a wealth cap, and defining the bottom. No one can fall below basic needs. And crime rates go down, and the amount of economic violence ensued upon people drops. And life expectancy goes up, and death rates go down. There's a lot to gain from it. It's very healthy for society. And when people know that basic needs are going to be met, if we did this, Gen Z might start having kids. But we cannot continue in the trajectory we are currently on, because it's just mired in economic violence. Not just economic violence, a lot of other types of violence too. So, as this fades out, that song will be playing. And I hope you enjoy it. I'll try to release a music video of it. I will leave as many links in the description as I possibly can. There's a lot of them. It's a lot. I will leave as many as I can. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and all that good stuff. And please, 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 don't be silent. when you become a victim of economic violence. Talk to other people about it. Educate people what economic violence is. There's probably a lot of people out there who have experienced economic violence and don't even know that that's what it is, or think about it in terms of being in a violent act done through economic means. We have to pay to take care of our dead, for fuck's sake. What kind of society does that? You have to pay for something that is inevitably, inherently unnatural process that can't be avoided. What a dumb system. You would think society would we would create it to handle that, regardless if they have loved ones left or not, like to pay for it. It shouldn't be paid for. Maybe it's just something we should do because we all have to do it. We all have to die. Maybe that's not something that should have a monetary cost on it. It's economic violence. Seems to be inherently part of capitalism. So, vote for democratic socialism. And if you happen to be a pro-capitalist watching this, my philosophy, my suggestion to you would be, don't ever advocate for unregulated capitalism. It just leads to feudalism. And feudalism was so horrible, there's a reason they call it the Dark Ages, and there is a reason we had revolutions across Europe to get out of it. There's a reason why. Because it is inherently so horrible to live in. People get to the point where they have nothing left to lose because they don't have any. So please don't be silent about violence. If you see someone who's a victim of it, educate them. Maybe they didn't even think of it in terms like that. There are many aspects in which it shows. Switch the framing of your mind and start asking questions like that. Do they need this? Or are they doing it because they want to cause harm to me with plausible deniability or whatever have you that causes harm to me through economic means? And if they know that it'll cause harm to me through economic means, why are they doing it? Why? Like, share, subscribe, comment, bell button. See you all in the next video.